UFO Swapcast with Grimerica and Marty Garza. You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Everest Plateau. So we don't need the sands of time for this particular intro, because this show is quite different in format from most of the episodes we do. First of all, two things were happening. Graham from Grimerica and I had been talking since the Egypt trip about getting together, like doing a Swapcast with Grimerica. But he wanted Marty on because Graham has been into the UFO subject for a long time. So this is another UFO episode, but with physics. It was a great discussion. But the other thing that makes this episode different is that for Grimerica, this was for their half of the episode was for their subscribers. So what you're going to hear is the first half of our discussion with the Grimerica guys and Marty. The second half will be available if you're a subscriber to Grimerica Outlawed, right?
Yep.
Their Outlawed subscription.
Or if you have like a secret pass like I do.
Yeah.
Because I'm on the inside here.
Yeah. If you know people, you can get yourself an inside scoop. Or if you are a member, the second half of the show that we did with them will also appear on our Patreon feed.
When Darren hears that, he's probably going to cancel my secret pass.
He will. He will. But this will still be a full episode. So the first hour, basically, you're going to hear the first hour that we did with Grimerica and Marty, and then the second hour is going to come back to Kyle and I here in the studio, which is like we also have weird time travel happening. Yeah. So first, you're going to hear us from yesterday,
and I wasn't
and then
there.
Afterwards, you're going to hear us from today.
I wasn't there in the beginning because I actually was out of town for work, and I was going to be staying the night, and then I was like at this trade show, and it kind of ended. I was hanging out for a little bit, and I was just kind of like, I don't really know if I want to stay. And then my calendar alarm went off, and it was like podcast 8 o'clock, and I was like, oh yeah, Russ is podcasting with the boys.
Yeah,
I was I'm going.
So I was finally trying to get rid of Kyle. And then he just kicked the door down half an hour
and showed up in the studio. And I thought, like, they're starting at 8. It's 8:05. They surely haven't actually started recording yet. So I roll in, and they were already 30 minutes in.
Yeah. Yep. So 30 minutes in, you'll hear the door open, and I'm like, oh, Kyle's back.
It's that guy.
So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy it. It was a fun conversation. And like I said, if you want to hear the second half of it, you can get it on our Patreon feed or on the Grimerica Outlawed feed. Otherwise, stick around after the first part, and Kyle and I will come back, and we're gonna continue part of the discussion because some of it was really good. And then we might, if we have time, we'll get to some emails and other things. All right? So Here you guys go. Hope you enjoy it.
Russ and Marty, welcome to Grimerica. Thanks for joining us. How's it going?
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Great to be back on you guys' show. It's been a while.
Good to see you both.
Yeah.
This has been a long time in the works, huh?
Oh yeah, it has been. But I mean, this is what happens, you know. We try to schedule stuff as best we can, but it's hard to get everybody together.
Yep.
But it's such interesting timing. I mean, Marty just mentioned, I'm glad that you mentioned it. We both sort of spent a few hours listening to the latest in the Joe Rogan UFO sort of sphere. So there's lots of this currents, and I've been looking forward to picking your guys' brain about what's going on, because it's been an alarming, to me, it's kind of been an alarming last few weeks with, all the UFO sightings and the government. So I'm really looking forward to digging into that a little bit.
Yeah. On the cusp of, or should I say the tail of our last episode, talking about the current events and some of my fringe conspiracy theories, I almost want to do the Snoopy dance and go, who's crazy now?
Yeah. I thought some of that too. I was like, doesn't sound so crazy now, does it?
Yeah. It's funny how when it comes out of the mouth of somebody of that stature, it takes on a little bit of a different facade.
There's so much to discuss, because I don't even know what I think about it yet. Like I'm just reeling from the amount of sort of, to me, like disclosure that's happening, and also a bit of disinfo and kind of leading us over here. And I also think I've got a pet theory about it being related to this energy thing and what Randall's talking about on Jerry. Like, why is this, the timing of all this to me shows that they're trying to sort of regulate or do something with any kind of hydrogen or splitting water technology, or something is happening, and the UFOs are connected with that. That's kind of the way I want to just start. Like, my pet theory is kind of like, this timing is all weird. And why didn't they purposefully didn't talk about Randall's thing on there? They left it all there. 4 hours went by and they didn't even mention any of that, although they skirted around all this physics and quantum physics and energy stuff.
Yeah. So
you see, this is almost exactly what happened on the Egypt trip. Graham and I were standing out on a street corner, and he makes a comment, and then we just start riffing. It was like nonstop. We were just like in sync, right? You picked up on the exact point that I picked up on that show. I think one of the most important parts of that Rogan interview was how he focused, Weinstein focused a great deal on suggesting that anti-gravity may have been cracked, or that this has been in development since 1953. But note that he skirted around what it would require in order to do it, the power, the energy that would be required to do it. He never really made a reference to it, other than saying that after his last appearance, he got a visit or a call by the FBI and the Department of Energy. I believe all of this, and also note that he said that all of the science appeared to have stopped in 1984. What else happened at that time period? SDI.
What's SDI?
Strategic Defense Initiative. Ronald Reagan's Star Wars program, which was actually put in place after Reagan had meetings with Edward Teller.
So wait, are you suggesting that SDI just began to classify all of the new interesting physics, or that it actually stopped?
No,
it captured it.
Yeah,
I believe
that's the first one. Yeah,
we touched on it in our last episode.
But hold on, he said he also went through this whole thing like, you should be able to find the physicists that have disappeared that are working on this stuff, and you can't. So it doesn't look like anybody actually is. That's what I thought that's what I was getting out of there.
No.
Yeah,
he said that
unless there's like a secret university system.
Right. He said you should be able to find them. And then he goes, that's an easy thing to do. He says, all you do is look at all the physicists and see where they went.
Yeah.
And what they did. And he pointed out that they went to, one of them is the University of Texas in Austin. And the other one was, I don't remember the name.
Stony Brook.
Yeah, okay. He said that the brain trust there was incredible, and nothing has really come out of there. He's suggesting that was rather strange, that there was that much brain power there and not a whole lot had come out of it. Also, I think he was sort of suggesting, without coming out and saying it, note that he brought up Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis and their company.
As like the only two guys that he can talk to about this stuff.
And of course, where are they located? In Austin, Texas, where the University of Texas is.
Wow. I guess I'm in the hot spot.
I hope we mentioned it, that it was what we're talking about is the latest JRE drop, which was actually like last night. I think it was February 22nd with Brett Weinstein, right?
Eric.
Eric. Fuck. Jeez. Wrong again.
Yeah, Eric Weinstein. Yeah. I mean,
Wrong
okay.
June.
So maybe I missed. It's possible that I missed bits of it because I was working and listening, but I thought his implication was he was basically saying, if there are physicists working on this stuff in secret, then we should be able to track those people down by saying, well, here's a bunch of physicists who are geniuses who, like, right after they finished their academic careers just seem to disappear off the face of the earth. And I thought the implication was that there doesn't seem to be a group of people that are like that, but maybe you guys are saying that he was implying there is.
Yeah, okay. That was a setup.
I must have missed that.
In other words, he's sort of doing, in effect, what I do. Like, in other words, he sets up a question and then he gets to the answer.
Yeah.
He goes, this should be verifiable. In other words, it's a testable hypothesis. There should be a bunch of physicists that never went anywhere, or that never seem to have gone on, people that should have had papers and maybe, all sorts of citations and accreditations and everything. And then he finds that a whole bunch of them went to these two places and nothing came out of there.
So that's the other thing is he's mentioning these places that seem to be the gravity places, right? That seem to be working on, or they are associated with some kind of gravitic work. But all of this was intermingled with his like long discussion about how physics stops. So are you guys tying all that together, saying physics stops because all the good physicists are being captured into something that is going to have a lot of work that isn't released to the public, that has no papers published? Is that the implication you were getting from what he was saying?
Yes.
Okay.
I
must have missed that.
He kept saying, "Is there a Manhattan Project?"
Yeah.
See, I said the same thing in the last episode. I said,
I thought he was saying that there isn't.
That Reagan, SDI, effectively was the new Manhattan Project to crack fusion.
Okay. Fusion.
I think
but I don't think he was. I think you're reading pretty deep into it. I don't think he was getting at that necessarily. I think I'm kind of more with Russ on this. That why did he say that? He's been called to help with disclosure. Like he got the call to help with disclosure, and they won't fucking give him any information, right? They keep
He's the same analogy I did.
What did he call it? It's the Meredith Baker problem.
He said
what he called
it was Lucy and the football. He said the same thing I did. Okay, there could be a couple of different things going on, I think. One is he could be completely honest, and he's saying I'm being jacked around just like the public is. But on the other possibility, he's saying I was contacted and they asked me to be effectively the intermediary between the government and the public, right? But then he says, but I was never shown anything. Maybe he is exactly doing like he's being honest, and then because if you notice, and I could be reading, I admit, I could be reading things into this, more so because of the fact that there's a lot of like backstory that he didn't talk about. He provided a lot of new information that supports a lot of the things that I've been putting together. And they fit so well with the stuff I've been putting together that it's like it's a cohesive picture. But if he kept saying, I want to get back to UFOs. It was like almost as though there was an agenda. Exactly.
Yeah, and
he was on there to make a point.
Okay,
and I think the point might have been to poke the people he needed to sort of push this forward a little bit and get your shit together and come out with the stuff. That's where I start to get conspiratorial and think, well, he wants them to come out with the stuff so they can start talking about energy. and what to do about because he mentioned that it's dangerous, right? These people are all mentioning that it's dangerous.
Okay,
and they don't want people fucking making this shit up in their basement.
But that's the connect. That's yet another connect. You're really good at you notice the same things I noticed. That point again. What would let's look at it.
But okay, wait 1 second. Wait a second. Okay. Just before you say that, I want to say that what I thought, and this is from the very beginning of the show. If you listen to the very beginning, Joe is like, I called you here because this UFO stuff is happening. I was like, Brett or Eric, come on the show. Tell me what's going on. So that's why he kept saying, let's get back to UFOs, because Joe had him there because Joe wants him to tell him what the hell is happening in our skies. Not that Eric was there pushing an agenda. Well, he is pushing an agenda, but it's the agenda of you got a call from Joe Rogan at 2 a.m. where Joe's like, what is all this shit going on in our skies, bro? Come on the show and talk to us about it. That's what I thought.
And they never really did talk about it. They never really did talk about they didn't talk about the latest events at all, did they?
And no. Joe was the one going on tangents, and Eric was the one reeling him back in and trying to steer it back into the UFO discussion. I mean, maybe that is his legitimate area of interest. I'm not suggesting that that's necessarily not what's going on, but it seemed like he kept repeating that, bringing this back to UFOs, bringing this back to UFOs.
Yes, because all of the stuff he was talking in terms of the names he was dropping, the science, the problems with physics, the whole thing he went on with string theory and that guy that everybody was afraid of, all of that was him trying to set the stage to answer to the question that Joe asked him, which was, how did you get into this UFO stuff? Right? That's how I read it. Like, there's this enormous story that, and Eric does this. He's like, so basically we need to start at the Big Bang, which is a classic physics. Feynman used to joke about this with physicists. Like, you ask them a simple question and they're like, okay, so basically we need to go back to the Big Bang because you need to understand everything about how I look at the universe before I can answer your question. Right. And that's what I thought Eric was doing. It was a fantastic thing, really. I don't want to sidetrack this, Marty, because I know you had something else to say about the fusion or the gravity.
Well, yeah, I just to justify another reason why I think that this was more about fusion than anything else is that Weinstein kept talking about the neutrino and all these. In other words, he kept bringing up the danger and all these things. Okay,
the neutron.
Exactly right. What is dangerous about anti-gravity necessarily? Why would that all of a sudden be potentially a threat to mankind? He used it as a bridge, possibly to, get off planet or, to try to, prolong mankind's existence by venturing out of our solar system. But he kept using it in a negative, a negative picture of that, or the potential danger in that, right? He kept saying, what if someone figured out a way to make this into a weapon, or somebody used it irresponsibly, right? That's fusion. That's not, I don't think that's anti-gravity. He's talking about, he just couldn't, I think he could not say it to not get in trouble, possibly. But at the root of this, in other words, I don't think you could, it's like the anti-gravity is the propulsion, but it still requires an energy source. And he never really referred to that part of it. And I think that's really where the science side of it, or the thing that's, in other words, the world-changing aspect of this is that, not anti-gravity.
Physics. Well, it might not even be physics. He might be putting too much weight on physics. I mean, maybe it's beyond physics in a way. Like, he even talked about, he made a couple good points about it being past Einstein, right? Like, we have to look past Einstein. So I did like how he sort of excoriated the paradigm right now of physics and how it's stuck, and you got to get past that. But it become like, if you look at Randall's presentation with Bendall's stuff, it's less about physics and more about geometry and
yeah. And he did say that like there was this thing where they were trying to quantize, what was it? They were trying to quantize gravity, and instead they did the other way around. They geometrized the quantum, right? So he was basically saying that similar stuff. I do want to, So Marty, I don't want to disagree with you on this anti-gravity thing, but you can come up with scenarios where anti-gravity, like for example, so Eric is big into he loves the field, right? He's into the whole idea of like forces or fields. Like obviously most physicists they talk this way now. So if anti-gravity actually involves some kind of field reversal, that could be very dangerous. You know, you turn it on and suddenly there's a giant sphere where you've completely reversed the vibrations of the gravity field in that area. Then you have a whole section of the planet that's inside this sphere that's now basically gravitically disconnected from everything else, and it could be catastrophic. You know, it could be. So
I don't disagree with that at all. But I mean,
I'm not a physicist. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
In other words, that's and neither am I. So,
yeah.
I mean, it sounds very plausible to me, right?
Yeah.
But I just look at it like stepping stones, right? In other words, it seems to me that, and maybe this is just a scenario that I've built in my head, since this is something that I actually was when I was a nuts and bolts ufologist back in the 90s. This was actually kind of the area that of my greatest interest, right? I was already kind of chasing the giant triangle mystery and all this, right? So it seems to me that the concept, in other words, this idea of having, like we talked about last time, you know, the flying aircraft carriers and these things, that like it was an idea waiting for the technology to catch up, right? And it seems as though that the biggest hurdle in that was the energy source. In other words, they legitimately tried to do this with fission, you know, trying to put nuclear reactors on mobile platforms, right?
Yep.
But it was
Cash
inherently dangerous, right? They tried, and there were, you know, the Soviets had proposals to do that too. But I think that based on the research that I've been doing, I think that Edward Teller met with Reagan and made the argument that, look, if we can crack fusion, it changes everything. There were other scientists, and this is where I would have loved to have had this conversation with Kyle included, because there's another scientist that started an organization. It was like to promote fusion technology. This was back in the 70s and early 80s. And he met with Reagan as well. And when Reagan announced SDI, this guy wrote a letter praising him, saying that this was going to change the world. He said, what is going to come out of this is going to change everything. He goes, it will be the end of war. It'll be, in other words, and the tone of it it doesn't sound like he's talking about lasers. He's not talking about weapons. He's saying this is the implication is that it's something else. And keep in mind, this is a fusion guy. So there are a lot of little puzzle pieces. Maybe the pieces don't fit together. Maybe I'm making connections that are not legitimately there, but
it makes sense how they debunked it. They debunked how they just went after cold fusion like nothing, right? I mean, it was very
okay. This scientist that started this organization, his company was foreclosed upon. All of a sudden, he was defrauding people. He was thrown in jail. Same fit the exact same pattern. You know, maybe the guy really was crooked. I don't know, but in other words, it's just. Yeah, that seems to have happened to a lot of guys that were chasing that stuff. You know, it's just odd. It's really odd. Weinstein tried to bring this back to UFOs by suggesting that we didn't do it. Whatever the technology, and this is what I gather. Maybe I had a different interpretation, but I got the impression that Weinstein was trying to suggest that we didn't really crack anti-gravity. It was gifted to us, or somehow it was reverse engineered from UFOs. That's sort of what I gathered from why he kept saying that his friends were telling him, it's not us, we don't have the ability. He said with 90% certainty that it was not us.
he even mentioned that the Tic Tacs weren't theirs.
Right. But I don't know if that's not that's the
but it's another thing it's another thing
line.
just pushing away the fact that they have this technology. And that's the other alarming part of it to me, is he was very much saying, like, this can't be found in the US government up front anyways. This can't be found. We don't have control of this, or we don't have this. It seemed like it was too much. He was trying to say that too much in a way, like, it, don't look here. It's not the government.
Yeah, that's, it's weird. I mean, I guess it's like they said, that you can't win. When they disagree with you, you call it a conspiracy, and then when they start agreeing with you, you call it a conspiracy. Like, in other words,
the other part. I mean, I really, it was a love-hate thing. Like, I loved some of the stuff he said, but then he's talking about direct evidence and how there's not enough direct evidence. I'm like, he's talking about the thousands of instances of indirect evidence, but there's no direct evidence. So what is he talking about? Like an actual craft? Physical craft.
Yeah,
like,
he wants physical evidence. Yeah.
He's sort of suggesting that the void is suggestive of something.
Yeah, that's what I got too. He was like, look, for a long time, I'm like, there's no direct evidence and we should have it, but now he's saying, like, well, I've encountered all these sober, like, very, very respectable people who are basically giving me anecdotal accounts of direct interaction. Right. So these people aren't saying, well, I heard this from my cousin or whatever. They're like, look, this happened to me. And he also, like, right at this point in the interview, it's like he kind of skirts around the consciousness issue. He does kind of like he floats around it. Like, he mentions several times in the show he's an atheist. Right. But at the same time, he's like, but, on these certain nights we sit down and we pray, and, like, then we all believe. Right. So he understands this. But the point is that he's saying, like, there's all this anecdotal evidence that you can't just throw away. And so I got the idea that he was saying that the lack of physical evidence is a little suspicious. I did get that as well. He didn't quite come out and say it that way, but
it's a good point.
Yeah. The other thing that he brought up, and this is like maybe tangential to the UFO topic, and we probably don't want this entire show to be a response to Joe Rogan and Eric, but
I didn't listen to it, so we definitely don't want to.
Yeah, well,
it'll lead to other places, I'm
right?
Sure.
But the other thing that he talked about is, with his, Joe asked him about, like, how do you actualize, like, physically do engineering on your gauge theory stuff? Right.
Good point.
And this is part of the thing that he was saying, and this is where you get the idea about what he thinks about energy systems. And he says that he basically was trying, and he had this long setup that was earlier in the show about the problem with physics and how it just basically came to a screeching halt. But he called it that modern physicists are trapped in the prison of Einsteinian space, right? And he's saying, like, well, the math is telling physicists that there's this little prison, and that at this end of the equation and this end of the equation, everything, like, goes to a singularity, and so you're trapped, and all of your thinking is trapped in this little spot, between with light speed, basically, is the idea. And so he's like, this is an issue, and this should tell us that our math is incorrect. There's something wrong, that it works okay, but then it gets out to this certain point and everything falls apart, like you have a divide by zero issue. And this should be an indication that there's something wrong in the concept, right? So physics has been trapped in this prison of, like, space-time, of Einsteinian space-time for a long time, okay? And the other thing he said was that the implications of some of his ideas, and these ideas have been picked up by other people, are that there are entire other sets of forces that we're completely unaware of, completely other sets of states of matter with their corresponding force states. Like, he was, like, talking about dark light. Think about that. If you have dark matter and it's an actual state of matter, but it's a state of matter that exists in some kind of quanta that we have no way of interacting with right now. But if we could figure this out, he was talking about we could maybe build negative matter. In other words, material that has negative mass. And I'm thinking of all the science fiction I've read and all of the games that I've played. Like, Mass Effect is based on this concept, right? People have been toying with these ideas for a long time. The Mass Effect in that story is that there's an element that allows you to take the mass of any object down to zero, and then it can travel at light speed or faster.
Is that how does implosion get you there instead of explosion then? I mean, all these people were in these chats from our past groups talking about all of Randall and Bendall's work and stuff, and they were going over all this implosion, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
What seems to happen with this Bendall technology is it's implosion instead of explosion.
Yeah, well, yes. Well, I don't know. I'm certainly not an expert on Bendall stuff. I've talked to the guy. I've been able to hang out with him only for a couple of hours. But, we had conversations about his stuff, and he's big on the vortexes, the toroids, and, but I have no idea about how his physical systems work. But Eric, and Eric, again, he was like, this is not on me. This was the great thing he was saying. He was like, I'm the theoretical guy, right? I'm not in charge of building the machine. I have no idea how to do that. He probably has to take his car to get an oil change, right? He's not going to build the machine. But he's laid the theoretical foundation for people who are physical engineers that could turn it into an engineering problem. Okay. But the point was that was connected to his concepts of UFOs. And he was like, if some of these accounts are true and there's physical evidence, like we are told, he's basically saying, like we have been told by some people in the government, saying we have good evidence that we can't show you. Right. Now, if that's not a troll or some kind of disinformation campaign, and they really have good evidence of objects where they don't know where those objects are coming from, and they definitely didn't build them themselves, and they're doing things that seem to, quote unquote, defy the laws of physics, then he's saying that means there's other laws of physics that we are not aware of. And maybe that's because our scientists in physics have been trapped in this prison of thinking for a long time. And possibly some of his physical ideas could get us out of that prison and open up entire other sets of states of matter and forces. And he also made a great point that, we have the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the electromagnetic force, and the gravitic force. And all of our engineering is based on the electromagnetic force. We're aware of 4 forces, and we only have control of 1. The rest of them, there's no application. Not one, even though we're aware of them, So we could be basically at the beginning of the technological scale here. Whereas if you talk to a lot of physicists, they seem to think that we're close to the end, that we basically got this place pretty much figured out. Just need to work out some details. So those are my.
I always think they have it figured out.
Yeah. Those are my hot takes.
I thought one of the best things that he said the whole interview was where he said that there was a double standard. He said, anyone talks about anti-gravity and it's pseudoscience and they're kooks. He said, yet the most brilliant minds in the world were working on it. And it was perfectly okay for them to talk about it in their private groups.
Yeah. And he also said that great science is also, how did he put this? That there's a difference between good science and great science.
He said it's pseudoscience.
Great scientists
are also
great scientists. Great science comes from people who are kind of wacky, right?
Yeah.
Good science is following the standard, whatever the standard model is at the time, churning out work, doing research or whatever. But great science comes from people who everybody else kind of thinks is a little weird. They got some kooky ideas,
There was a subtle point there also where Rogan mentioned, he goes, you mean like indisputable video or something like that? And he's like, no.
Yeah, no.
Like, no.
Yeah.
We're not talking.
Show me any video. I don't care.
Right.
Yeah.
He suggested like some form of evidence that was indisputable, not video, just something more concrete. And, I don't know if he's suggesting, again, we keep hearing this suggestion of physical. And he brought up Lockheed again.
Yep, he did bring up Lockheed. Yeah,
right.
He went through their entire generation. Yeah.
Right. What did he say in regards to Lockheed? I don't know if I think I might have missed that part. I know he talked about Renaissance technology being a funding application.
He was in the middle of dropping a series of names to set up something, and he was like, "These are the founders of Lockheed, by the way."
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, he mentioned Ben Rich, I know, but I don't know if he mentioned much about Lockheed.
Yeah, I didn't know 90% of the names he was dropping. He's like, have you heard of blah, blah, blah? I'm like, no, just no.
I also, it was pretty interesting when he was talking about the hedge funds that were
Renaissance Technology, the hedge
Right.
fund. Yeah.
Well,
Was Ben
just think
Rich the technology to take ET home guy
Yes.
from way back in the
Yes.
fucking day?
Mhm.
Was that like 2000 or something?
Yeah. He
Even
said
before that,
anything
maybe.
you've seen in science fiction, we've been there and done that. But yeah, if you, again, I'm going back to the fusion thing, but, and again, might be a really fringe connection, but think about it. If you had a world changing technology that is going to render all energy sources obsolete pretty much, you'd think you would need a hedge fund to control, like to monetize it, right? I mean, Naveen Jan says that when fusion comes online, that it won't be long until our electricity bills go the way of our cell phone bills. We pay a
Hey, look who just showed up.
oh,
Right on, hey, buddy.
so we can have to start the fusion conversation all over again.
Well, we'll see what.
Well,
happens.
we have to pay for our cell phone bills though. Still,
Right, but you pay for the service, not for the minutes. Remember back when we used to have to pay for long distance?
Oh yeah, I do. Remember.
Don't.
Yeah. Good point.
Don't touch anything, Kyle. He's coming in here and messing with my setup. Sorry, guys. Yeah, so Kyle just showed up mid-show. Welcome,
Hey, Kyle,
buddy.
how you doing, buddy? Welcome.
What's up, guys?
Hey, you want to speak into the mic or?
It's not recording, but I guess maybe.
Oh, yeah,
What?
I didn't hit record on his mic because he wasn't here.
Oh, I see. So
I'm recording.
yeah, well, we
what's
can
up?
hear you.
What's up, guys?
Well, let us
Thanks for
let us
joining
pause our recording 1 second so he can turn his recording on. 1 second.
All right.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Amateur hour.
Okay, there we go.
Yep. Check. There I am. All right, continue. Sorry for the interruption.
Well, I mean, we're probably going to wrap this sort of part up soon, but we were talking about Eric on JRE talking about all the UFOs and energy and stuff. So I don't know if you've heard any of that show just very recently, but maybe Marty has some questions about the physics that he wanted to ask Kyle, and then we can.
No, we were just. Have you, Kyle? I don't know if you've listened to the Joe Rogan interview with Eric Weinstein yet, but
I haven't, but I mean,
you're going to find it really interesting.
I've listened to him describe his theory of physics already.
No, this is very different. I think it's
Okay.
Takes on a. I've never heard him speak. He's never impressed me as much as I was never really a fan of his, but he gained my respect.
Yeah, it was
in this interview. He says
fantastic
he
episode.
says the right things.
Yeah,
Now, I'm not saying that he's not trolling us, but
I don't think he is.
No.
Now I haven't listened to this interview, but I've been hearing him talk about this theory for a long time.
But he really ventures off into what he thinks, I think, is fundamentally or not necessarily fundamentally, but what is going on as a result of the phenomena.
Okay, cool.
He gets in.
Go, keep going.
Well, I don't want to influence what he interprets. Maybe it's best that he listens to it and see what he draws from it. I don't want to steer him in certain.
He also goes to places that you wouldn't expect. Epstein and Maxwell.
Yep.
I mean, he gets into that stuff. I mean, he talks about a little bit of the wokeness, which I guess it now is a good. I don't know. I was going to save it a little bit, but the other thing that made me think is his influence from Thiel, and how Randall's connected in a way with Matt Lohmeyer, and Thiel could be a common sort of thing in all this. And it seems to me like I've always thought of there's a battle over disclosure in a way, and not necessarily from energy, but also just from communication and information purposes, like who's going to get a handle on disclosure. And this could be one faction pushing the needle forward a little bit, and maybe he was warming up Joe a little bit in order to sort of also help Randall bring out this stuff. I mean, maybe this is a bit of a like, hey, we're going to take this a notch forward now with Eric, and then that kind of opens up sort of a new pathway or some more capability to move other things forward.
I was traveling this past week, and I drove from Vegas to LA to visit my daughter out there, and on the drive, there's this place called Alien Jerky. Yeah, it's like a little convenience.
I know where it is.
thing.
It's right in Utah, right? It's right near.
It's in California. It's on the highway between Vegas and LA.
Oh, okay.
I pulled in there, and forever we've been, and this goes back to stuff we've talked about in the past episodes, but you always hear this, the whole secrecy thing is because the public would panic over, extraterrestrial life. They would, religions would collapse and governments would collapse and all this stuff. I'm like, I drive into the parking lot. It's packed. You walk in the store, there's dozens of people. I mean, it was elbow to elbow in there. Every alien thing, novelty T-shirt, stuffed animal thing you could think of. It's like that stuff is so pervasive in our culture now. I don't think it would faze people one bit. Like the excuse doesn't work anymore. That's where if they're keeping it a secret for some reason, I think fundamentally the phenomenon is the one pulling the strings, but regardless, the secrecy is for some other reason that we have not yet been let in on that secret yet. Is it because of the reverse engineering and the technologies that have been derived from it were so disruptive that it would have been irresponsible to let the public know about it? Or are there deeper, more fundamental, are we a farm effectively? Or just how deep do you want to go?
Didn't Nolan basically insinuate or possibly say that, what if it was this problem? Like if we found out that we're basically owned, didn't he say something like that?
Yeah. I mean, go.
Yeah.
Go.
He's going full Bramley.
We're ready for that. But then having said that,
but Graham's like, I'm ready for that. Yeah.
Having said that though, they're switching the narrative right now though, right? I mean, they're definitely making it sound like, oh, we don't know what this technology is. We don't know what could be. So they're insinuating that, it might be something else. And then we're not now on the other side of it, nobody's believing what they say either. But I wanted to ask you guys about the latest, and I heard you talk about this on your show and you talked about the current events and the UFOs, but why the timing now? Like, why now all of a sudden are they not only just claiming to shoot these things down, but specifically not using the new terminology and calling them objects, going out of their way to call them unidentified objects, and then having that be wrong? Because I mean, the Canadian Air Force guy called it a balloon and the reporter got all pissed off because it sounded like he didn't want to play this game of calling it an unidentified object when he knew it was a balloon. But there's something going on. Why the timing? Why now? Like, even if they change their radar system and they see something moving slower, or that little claim of, why all of a sudden they're seeing these, then you're just going to go automatically shoot it down because now you have the ability to see them. I mean, none of these explanations make sense, and the story hasn't been straight all the way along. So are they just totally incompetent, and why now? Why now is this all coming out? Why are they forcing this narrative now?
Russ, do you want to tackle that?
Me? No.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty stupid question. Like a big.
It's not.
Question,
No,
but
it's not. It's not a stupid question. I think that the simplest answer is incompetence, which is probably why it's wrong, right? So there's something else happening, but I have no idea. Like I see this kind of stuff is taking place, and I'm always like, you get some ideas. Like, are they trying to shift? I think maybe what you're implying is they're looking to shift the narrative on this topic a little bit. Some people have implied that, there's hearings in Congress and everything, and somebody doesn't like where this discussion is going, so now they're going to make it look like everything's always been a balloon, But I don't know. I think it's too early to tell what's going on. And these are the kind of things sometimes where even decades down the line, you still look back and you still don't really know what was happening. So I don't know.
Just after all the UAP talk, then they don't even use that terminology. Then they flip right back to UFO.
Yeah.
When they do their first shoot down. I mean, really? Now you're calling it an object now?
Yeah, they're using terms like entity. It's almost like deliberate. on the one
I
hand, you
believe it
think
is deliberate.
Yeah, on the one hand, you think, well, what is this? Some kind of weird, like, bureaucratic speak, or do they think they're being careful, or is this actually targeted to make people make connections that they shouldn't be making?
Well, and actually, Eric mentioned that he called it strategic ambiguity.
Yeah, and before we get off Eric, the other thing I want to mention, because we just brought up the idea that like Marty was saying, like maybe the truth of what's going on here is something that is, it isn't, because the idea that it's going to drive religions crazy or governments are going to collapse is just because there's aliens, like that doesn't seem to hold water anymore. So maybe the truth is something worse, and the concept that we might be owned. And Eric brought that up. He just made the suggestion of he made the comparison of, the protected island with the tribal culture on it. He was just like, what if it's like that? We're being protected by something else. Like, don't land here. This is a reserve. So he made that possibility.
They're not doing a very good job of protecting us.
Right.
See, I think that there's subtlety in the terminology. I don't think it's accidental. I think that there is most people just conflate the two things, but there is a difference between a UFO object and a UAP phenomenon. If, as anyone that's followed the UFO series knows that I'm not necessarily a believer in the nuts and bolts UFOs, in the sense that people typically would think like physical aliens from another planet traveling here. In other words, I think that it's weirder than that. It's the physical aspects are a manifestation of a non-physical intelligence, possibly. But I think that that's the difference. In other words, when they refer to UAP, that terminology, I think might have been maybe more honest than the UFO terminology, because the UFO acronym referring to objects is not necessarily does not very well describe the phenomenon itself. It's not, I don't think it's entirely physical. The most important parts of it are not the physical parts of it, in my opinion. In other words, I think it's interaction with mankind throughout history, interventions, and those kind of things actually are more significant than observations of physical objects in the sky that may or may not be terrestrial technology.
I agree with you. I mean, I've warmed up to the UAP thing too, but that's why I think that they're very, very subtle and intentional with their language. And that's why I wonder why they started calling it object, right?
That sounds more like angels, Marty.
Yeah. Well, demons.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, that I use those as labels because, again, we don't know what those things actually are. But the non-physical nature of the phenomenon, or the odd, I don't know that I could call it necessarily non-physical, but it's got non-physical aspects, and they've always been a part. There's never, even not, this isn't very well known, but even Kenneth Arnold, in his sighting in 1947, following his sighting, he had poltergeist activity in his home. Those aspects of the phenomenon were filtered out purposely. And this is, getting into some things that I do plan on covering in future episodes, but that there was a strategy. The UFO organizations were infiltrated by government agencies, and the high strangeness cases were being filtered out on purpose. Not, the excuse was, oh, those are too weird and we don't want to discredit, real science that we're doing. That was sort of a cover. They knew that there were these odd, unexplainable aspects to these sightings, but they didn't know entirely what to do with it.
Are you talking about the 50s then, or?
Oh yeah, this goes back as far
like NICAP and all that.
Yeah, and I think even Charles Fort, what did what was his conclusion? I think we're property.
That's right.
I think that the connections to the ancient encounters and all, I think it's just nobody was connecting the dots for a long time. But I think once if there were crashes, in quotes, I don't think there were actual crashes. I think there were gifts. But once there was materials recovered, I think that once they had materials in hand, I think as they began to investigate that, I think they rapidly came to an understanding that the more they studied it, the less they understood. It was beyond their comprehension of the level of technology of the day. And I think that it's probable that, maybe that aspect of Lazar's story was true. That was part of what he said. He said that they could not figure this stuff out, and that every so often they would start up another program to try to figure it out, hoping that the technology had caught up to it. I've said this in a previous episode that it's possible that Lazar could have been completely truthful and still be wrong. I believe that he was probably being fed disinformation, right? But every good disinformation contains elements of truth in it. And it's possible that may have been the case.
Did you get the sense that Eric had exhausted all his avenues of research when it comes to physics? Or, it sounded like he was really just talking about high-level government or academia type things and not really getting into sort of any of the fringe researchers out there. Or did he do that on purpose?
I think what he was saying is he wants to speak to another physicist who's on his level who's also looked at this stuff. And he was like, why can't I find someone? And he's not a physicist. He's a mathematician. So even he kept saying, like, look, I'm not a physicist, He's a mathematician. So now those two things can be very closely linked, obviously. And you could spend all of your time as a mathematician working on physics problems, which is what it seems like he's done. But he isn't necessarily a physicist. But yeah, his question was really interesting. He's like, where are the other people that I can talk to that know, like, I don't even remember the tensor something. He's the guy got specific things where he's like, I want people who know these very specific aspects of physical theory and mathematical concepts that have also looked at this, and like, where are they? The highest he can find are like electrical engineers, I think is what he was saying. So that was what led to the conversation of, can we track down the missing physicists?
Yeah.
Wait, so the missing physicists are real?
Well, I thought he was setting up a scenario where if there are missing physicists, you should be able to figure it out. And his implication was that there aren't any, but Marty and Graham took it the other way, that he was basically saying, here's how you could find out.
Yeah, he was kind of giving some breadcrumbs that there's a hedge fund and there's two places where this research is probably being done with the missing physicists.
Right, but I thought he was like listing names of the physicists that are associated with those places, so those people aren't missing.
He named the facilities that he did. I believe he did name a few names.
Yeah, he's like, here's this place that's doing apparently totally kooky research on anti-gravity, but here are all these extremely high-powered names associated with it. So those aren't missing physicists. They're just working on something very interesting, but not quite calling it anti-gravity.
Yeah, but he kept bringing up, is there a Manhattan Project? Is there a Manhattan? He made that statement multiple times. And keep in mind,
I didn't know there was missing physicists. Is there anything else missing?
I thought he was saying there weren't
physicists. It would be like others. I guess he wouldn't notice. I guess nobody noticed the missing electricians during the Manhattan Project. Right? Right. Gave a fuck.
Yeah, like, wow, there's like a lot of missing cooks and janitors.
Man, where'd all the welders go? Yeah. I'm having a hard time finding welders.
Oh okay, God. There you go. There's definitely a Manhattan Project for UFOs because all the welders are gone.
But
all right, enough of this.
They're welding balloons, man.
I want to transition away from the podcast and listen.
Okay, sorry.
That's about what I was going to bring up as well.
What do you guys think about the balloons getting shot down? Do you believe it is just they changed the radar and they were so? Here's the narrative, I guess, as I understand it. Not really paying attention or caring about UFOs. They had the Chinese spy balloon. Seems like it was actually a spy balloon. They shot that shit down. They changed the radar because the radar didn't find the balloon and they couldn't, so they had to change it to find these balloons. And then all of a sudden they shot down balloons all over, one in Alaska, one in Canada, one here, one there. And now they're not shooting down anything again. What do you guys think is going on there? And I guess they just did find now a Chinese like spy buoy someplace in Canadian waters. So what do you think's going on? Are they setting it up for war with China? Was it actual UFOs? I mean, someone was saying that there was a train derailment.
There's not called spy boys anymore. That's too gender
What are they
specific.
called? Buoys?
I'm just
It's a spy buoy. He just has a work streak. What do you guys think? Is it UAPs? They were calling it UAPs. They were saying UAP.
Kyle? You haven't said much.
Well, I listened to No Agenda. I heard that analysis. I thought it was pretty good. Like they were trying to figure out all these different ways they could shoot down the first balloon and do it in a way where they could take it down quickly and then retrieve the material. And so they ended up trying this missile, but they didn't want to do it in a way that would be very public.
Embarrassing
If it didn't work. So they did it over the ocean. And then once they figured out, okay, it works this way, now we can use that protocol for all of the other ones. So then they were real quick after that. I thought that was a pretty good analysis, but I don't know. I can't. I mean, what Russ was saying about like, why were they changing what they were calling it? Why wouldn't they acknowledge that it was a balloon, even though other people were acknowledging it? I don't know if they're trying to obscure something, like if they really are looking into UFOs or actual craft that they don't know what they really are, then this is just like this is a way like, okay, well, there's all these balloons up here. We can pretend that they're UFO and then we can make it mysterious. And then once it is revealed that, oh, it was just a bunch of balloons, then nobody will believe anything else the next time this happens. That could have been.
Yeah, that seems like the most likely to me. I mean, I would just right off the bat say no one shot down a real UFO.
Yeah.
With a missile. Right.
What about the octagonal shape?
Historically, them trying to shoot stuff down has always failed.
The thing that was strange about their description is that once they started describing the objects later, they started using all these shapes and stuff, but it was never clear if they were including the balloon in the description of the shape or the shape of what was under it.
Right.
Or even was the thing under it suspended, or was it attached more like a blimp, or
strategic ambiguity?
And it was just.
And then why do they wait until it's over the water and then they have to get? And then even the one in the lake, there was one in Canada where you think they'd be able to find the debris. I mean, is it really that hard to track the fucking debris? And they got to pick it up piece by piece out of a fucking lake.
I mean, I've lost my sunglasses like right next to me in a lake.
As though there's no like empty territory between Montana and the Atlantic, right?
Yeah.
There's nowhere you could have shot something down that the debris wouldn't have fallen on people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Montana is mostly empty.
Again, those excuses. Exactly. They're just excuses. Have you ever driven from fucking Calgary down south? There's nothing there. For
right.
If you,
24 hours. Mostly everywhere is mostly empty.
Yeah. If you get in a Cessna and you go fly over Maelstrom, they're not going to care if the debris or your body falls on somebody on the ground.
Yeah,
That's
they're
gonna
going to shoot
factor
you
into their
down. Yeah,
decision.
that's right.
Right. They're going to shoot you down and be damned whatever's underneath it. Too bad.
Yeah.
So why do they not want people to believe the next time, though, Kyle? I mean, that's an interesting theory, but why? So why would they like make it seem like it's an object and it's a balloon? Now people they're just ruining credibility on purpose. Or?
Yeah. So if there are warring factions within the authorities, and there are certain people in the authorities that are like, we need to clear this up, we need to get this stuff out in the open, and then there's another faction that's like, no, we do not need to get this out in the open, then this would be a perfect opportunity to obscure the whole story. It's like, oh, look, here's an idea. We can make this look like a bunch of UFOs. And then later, in a couple of years, it'll turn out it was just a bunch of balloons. I mean, it's like the same thing as Roswell.
Exactly.
Except that there's the Ukraine war that they're supporting and stuff. So there is like extenuating circumstances as well to think about.
Right.
They have
and
to
when
show their power and
I'm not-
sell their missiles. They talk about the exact model of the missile and stuff. Like that was kind of
Multiple agendas are always at work.
Yeah.
But I'm just
the Roswell, the Roswell balloon story. Then it was a secret balloon story. It was the mogul balloons, as though the for that again, that was for public consumption, as though the moguls were somehow secret. Like, no, mogul balloons were well known. In fact, there was a picture of one in the newspaper back in the around 47. That the existence of moguls was not a secret. It was what they were being used for. The fact that they had microphones to listen in for nuclear detonations in the Soviet Union was what was secret. The balloons themselves were not secret. So that was, again, they use words in a deceptive way. Like, they're not lying, but they're being deceptive. I mean, this is the same thing. I think they're just flooding the information channels. I think it's possible that the first balloon was a legitimate thing, that it actually did get detected and it got media, and all of a sudden they had to do something about it, but they sat on their hands for too long. It made them look bad. So now they had to come up with some second version that, we reacted immediately. As soon as it was detected, we shot it down. Regardless, I really don't care. Yeah. I know it doesn't have anything to do with UFOs.
It's possible that they knew about all of them at the same time.
Oh yeah, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. We got into a long discussion in the last episode of why I don't believe that. The methods for detecting these things. Although I did notice in Biden's speech, when he was talking about balloons, he mentioned airships. I'm like, airships? Who mentioned? When did anybody say anything about airships? Now you're getting into my territory.
Yeah, now we're going like full, late 1800s sci-fi.
Well,
right?
I think that some of the giant triangles might be airships.
That's what it is, dude. Antarctica's getting too warm, so they're all coming back. They're like, it's too warm down there.
The Nazis are coming back.
Our ice caves are melting.
Say dirigible. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no idea, guys. Honestly,
Ice Nazis.
Yeah.
There's bound to be some ice Nazis.
It's funny. I'm going to steer this maybe in a little bit different direction. That's not necessarily current events, but I thought it was something interesting that we all kind of shared in. Weinstein brought up the fact that he knew people that had relayed stories to him that were convincing. And he said, these were people with impeccable credentials that are saying incredible things. And he puts more, in a way, he almost puts more faith in that than any, since he has not been able to see any physical evidence that he says is convincing.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Brothers of the Serpent podcast. After a long delay, an overnight delay.
Another day, another segment.
That's right. And I actually did have a chance to listen to that Eric Weinstein Joe Rogan episode. I'm not done yet.
How far in are you?
Let me check.
It's 4 hours.
Yeah, it's a good one.
But I think
I
maybe
still got an hour and 11 minutes left.
Yeah, so the last 45 minutes are not UFO related mostly. So,
But
I think.
you were right. Like I was saying, well, I've heard a lot of his discussion on physics, and it's really cool. But I don't understand any of it.
Yeah,
He does talk about these, all these mathematical principles and ideas, tensors,
Yeah.
Hilbert space, all this stuff that I have no freaking idea about. Zero concept of. So it is difficult, but that's The Portal, which was his podcast where he really discussed it in detail.
Yeah. And I did do that. After you told me, you were like, listen, you need to go. And I listened to every Portal episode. So I did do it. And you're right. There's a lot of stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in there. You're like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one in particular I need to go back and find where, and this pertains to some of the stuff that Randall's getting involved with right now with Bindle. But, Bindle's, these geometric forms that he has, like these...
Yeah.
Bindle describes it as this, you take a sphere and then you collapse it and you have this.
Yeah.
He's talking about a toroid, essentially. Right. There's another geometric design that is basically circles. And the circles are, you're overlaying the circle over and over as it's like a spinning plate or like a coin that's been spinning that's.
Yes.
And so if you draw a bunch of circles and you do them systematically in this sort of wobble, they create this interesting toroidal spiral.
Yeah.
And this guy that he interviewed, they start talking about this discovery that he had. And he was like, he had it while he was driving in a car with his family going to some funeral or some weird situation like that. And he's just like, oh my God. And then he just obsesses over this thing. And he drew this real crude drawing of it at first. And you can actually still find that drawing online, but I can't remember what it was called. So I couldn't find it. But anyway, there's a lot of nuggets in there, in The Portal and in this Joe Rogan interview with Eric, which I think for me was much better because he was trying to, in The Portal, he's intentionally not speaking to the layman.
Yeah.
And he makes that point in the beginning of many of the interviews. Like, I'm having this discussion with this other physicist or this mathematician. We are not going to dumb this conversation down to the layman level. We are going to just talk to each other, and you will witness like an actual conversation between two mathematicians or whatever.
Yeah.
And it is, they are speaking a different language, folks. So it's tough to get through. No harder than, I guess, the Zendavesta.
Yeah.
But it is
You're not having to listen to Robo Voice, dude.
Yeah. But yeah, it was very cool. Like a lot of the stuff that he said about what happened, what has happened in the last 70 years in physics. I've heard this before. I've heard him talk about this before. I think it's great. And the possibilities that he is stating in that interview that are available for research and for study, like, is very hopeful.
Yeah.
And I like the way he talks about how he's like, I could be wrong. My theory could be wrong.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I want to know if I'm wrong, but it needs to be tested. He's not an experimentalist, and he's talking to Brian Keating.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, we need to hit up Brian Keating and be like, will you come on the show and talk to us about an experimentalist and like some of your ideas concerning like Eric Weinstein's, your talks with him.
Yeah.
If it's not like
secret.
If it's not secret, Eric seems to be like pretty open about stuff. So it would be interesting to hear from Brian.
He's got his own show now too. He's very, very successful.
I haven't listened to his show, but I should.
He's got his own YouTube channel. He's done very well.
Cool. I wonder if he would still deign to come on the old Snake Bros show.
Would come talk to us.
I think it's worth asking him. Like, dude, will you come talk to us about this specific thing? Like, as an experimentalist, you know, I would like to know what his thoughts are on the things that Eric said about academia or the physics, you know, the state of physics.
Yeah.
Because he also saw some of these forces in academia that were not nefarious, but not good for the advancement of science.
That's right.
And that was what his book was all about.
Yeah.
Losing the Nobel Prize.
Yes.
It's like this Nobel Prize, like, drives people in directions that is not scientific.
Yeah, that's right.
And he was part of that. And it really impacted him when they were nominated and then realized, like, oh, we made a mistake.
Yeah.
And so they lost it, and it had a huge impact. He rethought his whole, like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, I was interested in being an experimentalist, and then suddenly all the goalpost moved over to, like, Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
And it's like driving you in this direction. Really cool. I would like to hear his thoughts on that interview. I think it would be cool if we could get him on.
Yeah, and when Eric said that he's been talking to him, I was like, I wonder if he means on Keating's show. So I need to go look through Keating's show and see if, like, they've had conversations on Keating's show and see if we can get more insights.
I love the stuff that he was saying, that Eric was saying about, you know, Einstein's basically model of the universe and how it limits, like, it's trapped us in this box of space-time.
Yeah, a prison.
And that time is really a variable in the equations, right? Like, I don't know how to talk about this, but it's like those things are not constants, like, in the sense that they can't be manipulated.
Yeah.
So I just think that's really cool. And during listening to it, I just was thinking.
Well, the other thing he said was something that, like, I've heard other mathematicians and physicists say this, and I've even read some of my favorite sci-fi authors in the 60s saying this. Not necessarily. Well, sometimes they'd say it through their sci-fi. So a character in one of their science fiction books would talk about it, and it's usually put in the sense where this person's way in the future, where this problem has been solved, and they're talking to some younger person, telling them about the history, and they're like, "Yeah, so for 200 years, the entire human race was trapped scientifically in this mathematical problem." Yeah. And then finally, you know, something happened, or some genius came along and was like, no. Here's how the math actually works. That part is mostly correct, but when you do this, and then everything changes. And Eric is basically saying the same thing, that when the math is trapping you between two singularities, you know you've done something wrong.
Right.
You don't necessarily know how to fix it.
Right. But there's definitely a problem.
But you have a divide by zero issue. Yeah. And like, I've tried to find out if other people feel this way, and they don't seem to question it. They're like, no, it's, you know, it isn't dividing by zero, you know. And I'm like, well, it just seems like nature doesn't do this, right? And this is you can see this with people who have an issue with the entire concept of a black hole, because the concept of a singularity in space is basically saying that our math that points to singularity is when you reach this certain threshold. Yeah. This is how it manifests in space.
Right.
The black hole is the manifestation of the singularity that shows up in the math. Now, the interesting thing about that is there are objects out there that act a lot like what we might expect from a very massy object and a very packed into a tiny spot, right? But that's again going on the idea that we understand what's going on with gravity, that we understand what's going on. And Eric is actually pulling all those things into question. And he's saying what we're looking at is like one tiny slice. He's like, we're basically in flatland in a 14-dimensional.
Yeah.
You know,
that was interesting too, that it's like it actually breaks apart into like 7 and 7.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's so. This is what happened in my mind. It's like I've been really skeptical of all this like Bendel stuff and the stuff that he's saying. It's like, okay, this guy, he's got, like, if he's right about his theories, then he's also right about the ancient history of the world, right? Which is like, I just find this to be extremely unlikely, right? Trying to be a good Bayesianist. Like, this is very unlikely.
How have you made that connection? Because I see what you're saying, but I haven't quite made that connection.
He draws all the connections to like the measurements of the pyramids and the measurements of the Ark of the Covenant and all that. And so like and that this technology is actually ancient and he's rediscovered it. Mm-hmm. Randall said as much.
Yeah.
On Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so he's not only has he discovered something, but he's actually rediscovering and knows that he's rediscovering something based on the way he analyzes historical artifacts.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, man, that makes it that's not compelling to me. That's even makes me more skeptical.
But let's say, just for example, that at least part of Bendel's tech works somehow.
Right.
Just one of the devices he claims that he can build, whether it's the turbine or the engine efficiency increaser,
thunderstorm generator, blah, blah, blah. Retrofitted engine
let's
parts.
say that any one of them works, then the principles that they're operating on still remain to be investigated by other people.
Right.
And then if the principles that those things are operating on also happen to coincide with a bunch of sacred geometry and numbers, well, we've already had that question about ancient civilizations.
Right.
Just because, and for a while it has seemed like, and we've talked to Randall about this, for a while it has seemed like, well, these numbers are actually fundamental to the universe.
Right.
They seem to exist out in the universe, whether or not you're building a power station or a faster car, right? So it's totally possible that ancient civilizations have been encoding these sacred numbers into their architecture without having built Bendel generators.
I mean, it's similar to like the circle or pi.
Yeah.
Or phi or something like that. These are fundamental numbers. And so the fact that they show up in like ancient sites and also modern engineering is not strange.
They don't have to be connected is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that, like, for me, I completely agree that I think that Bendel trying to say this is an ancient technology I'm rediscovering, I'm just like, okay, whatever.
That's what I'm saying too.
Let's make it work.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't care if you think ancient people built these things. Maybe they did.
Right.
So what? Right.
Yeah.
But what I also am saying is that doesn't have to be true for him to be right about the machines.
Totally agree.
Okay. So just don't limit it that way in your mind is what I'm trying to say.
I'm talking about his theories, not his devices.
Oh, okay.
Like his theories, to me, like his theory about what's happening and like how it all connects to like ancient civilization.
So his devices can work and his theories can still be wrong.
Completely wrong.
Yes, that's what I'm going for.
I agree.
Okay.
But
all
then
right,
again, I'm listening to Eric and I'm thinking like, holy crap, like what he's talking about, like in this one particular part where he's describing families of matter.
Yeah.
And
where Joe kept asking him, well, what would this technology look like? And I'm like, Joe, don't you get it? He's telling you that he can't build stuff.
Well, number one, he's not an engineer.
Yeah.
He's not an experimentalist.
Right.
So
he's a theoretician.
He's a mathematician.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that he basically is saying, like, I have this theory, and so I need someone like Brian Keating who looks at theories, and then Brian Keating, being his own specific type of puzzle solver, figures out something to build that could test it.
Yeah.
An experiment that could actually be built and to test this.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Then Brian Keating hands that to the engineers.
Yeah.
And the engineers are like, okay, here's the materials we need and all that. Like this is awesome.
Yeah.
But it just made me think that, like, when he was talking about the different families of matter and how some of them may be like actually constructed from the Higgs boson, like starting there, because apparently that field is what gave matter, its mass, and all this. So it's like you start there, and you then construct a family of matter that is not the right hand rule or whatever of all. You know, it doesn't have like the beta decay. And like he had mentioned this, and Feynman talked a lot about this. And spent a whole lot. Remember in the series we did on Feynman, where he was like, "What's the difference between left and right? Well, how do I tell this to the Martian?"
Right.
And he goes through this whole whatever it is, the beta decay thing.
Yep.
And it's like, well, if you look at this and then you wait for it to decay and it comes out and it's spinning to this side, that's it's going away from you. That's right.
Right. But antimatter's the other way.
Yeah.
So if you go to shake the guy's hand and he sticks out the wrong hand, don't touch him.
Do not touch him.
Right.
But anyway, he's like,
Feynman mentioned the symmetry issue, left and right. Why is there this chirality? Like
our matter all is like right-handed or whatever.
Yeah, there's a right-handed, yes, like the
spin properties and all this. We don't understand this enough. I definitely don't.
Yeah, we're
really
not
talk about it.
We're not mathematicians.
But I recognize what he's talking about based on other things.
Concepts, right? That there's a symmetry issue.
So you could build matter in different ways that may have a whole different set of forces.
Yeah.
And so that's what ties this all together for me.
Yeah, he said there could be entire other spectra. That
dark light, all this kind of stuff. You know, these.
Yeah, he was basically saying like, so if we have dark matter and there's a whole bunch of it out there, it's interacting with us very weakly. It could be constructed of material that is built on totally other principles.
And gravity is actually maybe not even necessarily a force, but like a linkage between these various families of matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
then he was talking about
it's like the
material with negative mass.
Yeah. So the thing that this made, it sort of like reinvigorated certain pathways of ideas that for me was like going back to, you know, these ideas of resonance, or, you know, we're looking at these Egyptian artifacts and these big, you know, these pyramids and these giant constructions and the strangest things that they're building.
Yeah.
And how could this, like the engineering capabilities that they had, and what is the usefulness of some of these objects? Like why, like if form follows function, what is the purpose of these things? They're so baffling.
Yeah.
But then if you try to put in these very out of the box concepts, like different families of matter that have whole different sets of forces that they work with, then I'm like, okay. It kind of opens that door again for me.
Yeah.
That like, okay, maybe the ancient people did have, like, they didn't maybe develop the nuclear bomb or computers, but maybe they did find out some of these other fundamental aspects of nature.
Yeah.
And they were utilizing those things. So when we're inside the pyramid and we're looking at it, I'm like, what is the purpose of that? Well, they're dealing with like a completely different family of matter with different forces, and we don't. So we wouldn't even recognize the engineering that was built to utilize these things.
Yes.
So and then that brings me back to Bendel.
Yeah.
So I'm like, damn it.
Yeah.
Maybe he engineered something that is utilizing some other.
Yeah, it's utilizing a principle that may be something that was
just
used a long time
completely
ago. Yeah.
not understood, and that maybe was used a long time ago. So it's like, all right, like, see, folks, like, I'm trying to do my job of being a scriptard. I am the resident scriptard on this show, but that interview, just like, there was just a couple of little nuggets in there that I was just like, damn it.
Yeah.
Kind of opens some doors. So I'm very interested to see where this goes.
I wonder if Joe would make that connection. Probably not. Maybe not. I don't know. I
wonder the same. So here was my thought.
Maybe he's like, maybe I should release that episode.
Here was my thought. My thought was this. Who is Joe going to send that interview to?
Yeah.
So he's like, hey, bro, like, hope you're doing well. Like, why don't you check out this interview?
Yeah.
So I had this thought that, like, maybe he decided to, like, give it to Eric. Just like, what do you think about this guy?
Yeah. Could be.
Maybe. And it's interesting that Eric is saying in the show that like academia is not putting any resources into people who like we used to be cowboy science.
Cowboy science. Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's fucking Bindle.
Yeah. Yeah.
No offense to Bindle, that's a compliment.
Yeah, garage guy.
Like he's out there
Yeah.
just like winging it and
Yeah.
just, has his ideas and he's building shit.
Yeah.
And so there was a number of thoughts that I had too, because the other one was that like, okay, if there is a lot of manipulation and deception going on within the government or the powers that be, and then not even bringing up the UFO question or what that might be, what types of deception is going on there from outside of known authorities, that he also could be a tool.
Yes. That's right. Yeah.
Because it's like, man, it just depends on how deep the deception goes. Like, do the authorities know of these other things? And this is why academia has like done this whole circuitous route around the sort of cowboy science and like, let's just get out there and like fund things that are
blue sky research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get outside of that. Let's say, oh, no, we're doing it. We've got him all figured out, blah, blah, blah. Because really what we're doing is digging deeper, like he was saying, like we're discovering the neutron again.
Yeah.
In many ways. And we don't even want to let other powers know that that's even happening.
Yeah.
And so it sort of goes hand in hand with the UFO thing, because it's like, well, let's pretend like we're really looking into this. And then tell everybody, like, tell us all your stories. We won't ridicule you. And then we ridicule everyone and make it all look like the stupidest, insane people you can ever imagine.
Yep.
And you prop up people for a while, and then you destroy them.
Yeah.
And it's like, is this what's happening? Like with Bindle, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Bindle seems concerned.
He does. Like he's been contacted or something, who knows?
Yeah.
We don't know anything specific.
Right.
Don't get me wrong here. This is totally, I'm just ballparking this, but
yeah. And Eric talks about being contacted and then they give him the runaround, right?
Yeah. They're
3
like
years.
the little carrot and the stick thing.
Yeah. What did he call it? I said it earlier. You guys probably heard me say it earlier in the Meredith Baker.
Yeah. He's like
Meredith Baker issue. Yeah.
She's like, well, I gotta go wash my hair.
She's like, well, I really like you. I really like to go out with you, but I need to,
wash my hair.
And then finally somebody's like, look, she's Mormon.
You're Jewish.
You're Jewish. It's never going to happen. She likes you, but she wouldn't say that to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So very interesting. I mean, that took me completely by surprise.
Yeah, and he never quite gets there with this interview.
Gets where?
He never quite, to what I'm about to say, he never quite gets all the way to saying this, but it seems like I've listened to a lot of Eric with The Portal, and you kind of learn how he talks about things. He's, he can be seeming to be riffing, going crazy, right? Like at one point he tells Joe, he's like, give me alcohol so I have an excuse, right?
Yeah, I have an excuse to get things wrong.
Yeah.
That's great.
And an excuse to maybe say things that he shouldn't. This is the other thing. It's like, I got the idea that he's like, well, give me alcohol so I have an excuse, because he is very careful in how he approaches certain topics, right? So Joe would ask him this question, and then you're listening to him talk, and you're like, okay, I'm assuming, as I'm listening to him, that everything he's saying in response to what Joe says has something to do with the question, which makes it a fun interview to listen to, because sometimes you're going 30 minutes, right, and you're like, this still has something. He's building.
Jordan Peterson does the same thing.
Right. But they always come back around
Yeah.
and they show you like, oh, all of that bullshit
Yeah.
he just said actually has everything to do with the question.
It gives you all this
you can't-
context
right?
and- yeah.
So I'm, like a classic physicist. He is a mathematician, but like a physicist, he's like, so basically the Big Bang, right? Like whatever question you ask, they need to start out by giving you the basic principles of the universe. So he does this, and he never quite gets around to saying. He never quite gets around to connecting certain things, but I think you're supposed to like understand that that's what he's doing, right? One of the things that he didn't quite fully connect was his ideas on what his concepts, like the gauge theory, the implications it may have for the state of the universe, and what he sees when he's looking at what he feels like might be credible UFO reports. Right? So all the stuff about strange states of matter, like he went through this whole thing, like, he kept trying to describe like, a normal a proton or whatever, it has these different kind of quarks in it. And that knowledge of that means nothing.
Yeah,
Engineering wise.
Get it.
Yeah. In terms of engineering, it has done nothing for our manipulation of the physical world. You can't get those quarks out of those particles. But he starts talking about material with negative mass, and then you start thinking about the way UFOs seem to act.
Right.
And a lot of this is in response to a very early question where basically they were talking about it seems to break the laws of physics, right? And he's like, well, hold on now. Who told you that? Like, have you talked to a physicist? Like,
right,
you know? Well, I know
no, you can see it.
They defy the laws of physics. Well, who, did you get an expert to come and tell you, like, yes, I am an expert in the laws of physics, and I can tell you that thing is defying all of them. Well, if that's the case, then what does that mean? Nothing defies the laws of physics.
Right. It defies your concepts.
It means that theories may have just broken. Right. So it was just really interesting how he's basically saying, well, here are some possible ramifications of like his ideas and what that may tell us, and because Joe was like, tell me about the technology and what this may lead to. And he's basically starts describing all these different states of matter, whole other spectra of forces that we don't even see or interact with, but we may be able to manipulate engineering wise. And then you're thinking about the UFO reports. They change shape. They like move without consequences of momentum.
Right.
And I'm thinking, well, yeah, if you had material that has zero mass, or you could manipulate the mass level of the material,
or the size and the time of it.
Yeah.
Like that's the other thing. It's like he basically described like a Hogwarts situation where it's like you've got this tiny little thing and inside it is a gigantic library of stuff. It's like, and it's microscopic basically because space is a variable.
Yeah. That's right.
So it's like if you had something that could, like he was saying, sort of just skip around, like change the size of the ruler as opposed to manipulating your position in space.
Yeah.
Then you can put yourself in a different place or make a tiny thing actually gigantic.
Yes, that's right.
That's how they built the pyramids, bro. They were really small.
Yeah, and you're just like, okay, take that cubit and go.
No, but yeah, it's and you see some object, and then suddenly it's just like, and it flies away from you, and just seems to like vanish instantaneously. Well, that just got small.
Right, it got small.
It didn't make any noise.
Yeah,
it's very interesting. Wow. Really cool to hear somebody talk about things like that. That was just...
Or they just hit rewind.
Yeah.
They came in, they're all, and then you're looking and they're like, rewind. Whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was... I'm going to need to listen to it again. I've already decided this.
I know. Me too.
Yeah.
I'm not even done. And I was like, I'm going to have to start over.
Yeah.
There's so much in there.
Yeah.
He completely lays out his whole theory on his show, and it's just, and then he tells you like, go watch this video of him giving a lecture about it.
Yeah.
And I watched it.
I don't remember if I watched any
Dude.
videos.
you know, he's got a chalkboard and stuff, and I'm just like, oh, man. I was complete. You know, you lost me at hello.
Yeah. Yep.
Makes me want to study math. I want to know what he's talking about.
Sometimes you just have to trust other people to know,
I know,
how to talk
I
about
know.
that shit.
I ain't got time for that. But I do like to like plow through it anyway,
Yeah.
because sometimes there are nuggets.
There are nuggets,
I
yeah.
did the same thing with Feynman, or with physics in general. I listened to all these lectures and just it's like I have no idea what they're talking about. But occasionally there'd be something I'm like, oh wow, like
Yeah.
I'd grasp something.
Yeah. He didn't even go into the, like, you know, he's had a, I follow Eric on Twitter. I've never talked to him there, but I just read most of the stuff that he says. He's quite vocal there about UFOs. The other thing he talks about not as often, but he has mentioned, is the problem with peer review.
Yeah, that was an interesting
And
one
I
too.
thought for sure, because he mentions it briefly in the show. He's like, you know, the peer review.
It was basically a scam.
Yeah, you get the project, and then peer review starts. So when he's discussing how science or physics basically stagnated, I was like, he's going to bring up peer review because he thinks it's been a horribly negative force.
Yeah, he describes it on the show as being like it was this genius idea by this one guy to make a bunch of money.
Yeah,
Essentially,
with
like
all the journals. Yeah,
peer review existed mostly in the medical and the medical field.
Yeah,
And then this guy was like, hey, like we could make this like a sort of a staple, I guess you would say, for universities to have in all fields.
yeah,
And I'll just like create a shit ton of journals and they'll have to buy it. And so I'll make a whole bunch of money. And then we get the peer review in to like make sure that they can get their stuff published in our journal. And it's essentially what he described was a money-making scheme by one guy.
Yeah.
Which is what resulted in this whole situation.
It's interesting because I've also heard it described as, well, I don't want to get this, I may be getting this super wrong, but I've also heard it as a method for non-scientific people to be able to have a method to vet for funding, right? So it also is a seemed like a good idea at the time kind of thing, where it's like, well, here's the government with a ton of money that they want to give to scientific endeavors, but how do the government people like decide what's going on?
Right.
And you can't,
So you can control that with peer review.
Yeah.
Oh, and
so like
really happening
Yes.
in a big way.
Yeah. So you end up with what seemed, it's one of the unintended consequences things where, it seems like a good idea at the time, but like it has all, like maybe like you're saying, like Keating has talked about with the Nobel Prize, like seems like a good idea. Like, yes, let's
Incentivize people to
incentivize people to come up with new stuff. They get a prize, whatever. But what it has really done is like it's shifted.
It's made it more political.
Yeah, it shifted the goalposts of scientists in ways that may not be positive. And Eric's thing about blue sky research, I was just like, damn, like you hear about Skunk Works projects, which is supposed to be blue sky, where basically you have something, but these are usually private organizations like Lockheed, they'll have a Skunk Works, which is basically like, we're going to give you a budget, an annual budget of a couple $1 million, and you guys are all weird. Just go down there and try not to kill everyone, right? Yet, like, don't blow up the building.
Yeah.
But, like that's blue sky research. Like how regulated is that? They probably have controls even on that. Like those guys also have even though they're in Skunk Works, they have their careers in mind, and they don't want to do something that's completely ridiculous. But that's the thing.
Well, I hope this spurs on some, very wealthy people to like fund some of these guys.
I know, that's
and
what
I know for a fact that this is happening.
Yeah.
In some places, like there are groups that are looking into not necessarily alternative models of physics, but they are looking into, energy, like how to, various different technologies for energy and stuff like that. That's definitely happening. But it would be great to see this on more on a fundamental level in terms of, our ideas, like humanity's accepted ideas of what's going on in nature. Like we need to.
Yeah.
I felt for a long time, the layman that I am, that there's so many places that needs to be re-looked at. It's just like, no, this.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem right. It doesn't. And I'm not, obviously, I don't know. It's just, to me, there are so many things about it. The more I've looked into the standard model of physics that just don't feel right about, there are some ideas and laws and things that are like, yes, this makes sense. It seems harmonious. It makes sense on many levels. And then there's just other stuff that's just like this. I don't know. It just doesn't have that harmony to it.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to describe it because I don't, I can't break it down to like mathematics and things like that, but it's intuition.
I'm just trying to think of specific, like the light speed constant is one.
That's
what it does to the other variables is what really gives people trouble. And I've had a couple conversations recently about this where I'm trying to and I end up in the position where I'm like, this is, here's how it works. And keep in mind that I'm not telling you that this is what I think really happens.
Yeah.
I'm trying to explain to you the ramifications of the standard model of this picture.
Right.
And people are just like, wait, like light doesn't change, but time does. And I'm like, yeah.
well, one of the big obvious ones, I think, is dark matter.
Yeah.
Like the dark matter makes it, when you look at the way it's debated as to whether or not it is an actual some other material that's causing, that's having the same, in other words, it's just like matter in the sense that it has gravity and all this kind of stuff versus the people that are, that would say, well, maybe there's a problem with gravity.
Yeah.
And so you see this whole debate going on, and then there's, that debate's been settled, right? They're like, nah, it's in the cosmic microwave background. We can see it there too. It's definitely, there's something there. And so they're like, well, it's not a problem with gravity. Like, no problem. Gravity's solved. It's even though we have no idea how it works or anything, it's fine.
Right.
It works. That is one of the big ones for me. That there is a big problem here, and that is admitted to. That by the standard model, they're like, yeah, we have a big problem. We don't know how to make up for this.
Yeah.
Discrepancy, but they're still looking at it through the standard model and how to fix it.
Yeah.
Whereas Eric is coming from a position of like completely outside that standard model, saying, no, I can make sense of all this.
Yeah. That's
what I like, right? Like
Yes. And I think he also rightly pointed out that gravity itself, and this was so interesting. I don't want to get too far into a tangent here, but I do want to talk about, again, how he discusses things.
Let's do that after the break.
Oh.
That went by quick, huh?
Yeah.
Can you keep your thought, or you want to?
No, go ahead.
All right. We'll be right back, folks.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, brothers of the Serpent Podcast. Spending an entire episode talking about another podcast. Sorry if you haven't listened to it yet, but it is a great episode. Really recommend you listen, because if you're interested in UFOs or physics or the current state of science, it's just a really important episode. Eric is a great voice. He has this interesting stance or standing in the scientific community, I think, and that is that he has all the credentials. He's a bit of a maverick. And due to some things that have happened in the past, he sort of stands outside of academia, but he knows it really well. right? And so the stuff that he was saying about what the difference between good science and great science was just really cool. You know, he was like, great scientists, the really important breakthroughs come from wackos, right? People who, like, everyone else kind of is like, man, that dude's a little crazy. But he said, he was like, the thing about doing great science is following up, chasing down crazy ideas and being wrong and getting stuff totally wrong, right? You know, that's great science. Good science is following all the standard stuff and, like, not ever stepping out of the line, and you're doing good science. And maybe that's what you want for the most part, for example, in the medical field.
Yeah.
You need good
that
science.
makes sense, yeah.
But when you're talking about, like, basic research, fundamental research, you know, maybe what you want is more great science.
It's kind of
people who are willing to push the boundaries, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like Sherlock Holmes, right? Like, he was unconventional
Yeah.
in the way he investigated a mystery.
Yeah.
No, you know, all the normal people are like, well, there are the footprints and, like, we're going to follow it. And obviously it was a guy who was, like, about this size and whatever. And then there was blood in the room and the dead guy's in there. So this guy at the footprints is the one who killed him and this and that. And they just follow this normal standard route of investigation. And he, you know, Sherlock always had this weird way of looking at the situation and going outside.
Well, the first thing he sees when he goes in the room is that those footprints are not the guy that killed him. Like, he already knows that because there's a tiny piece of tobacco in the corner. Right?
There's like a specific cigar ash that's laying next to it. It's like, I know that cigar.
Yeah.
I have studied cigar ashes, by the way.
Only ladies smoke that kind of cigar.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was really interesting to me was Eric talking about, and this kind of ties in with what you were saying about the, you know, that there's that there are issues in the standard model. And you can kind of see, like, there's a harmony problem in some ideas. And he just basically is saying, like, look at this gravity stuff. How much basic fundamental research is being done on gravity? I think this is a good question. And I kept waiting for him to answer it. And he didn't really say. He said that there are these institutions that have really big names attached to them that seem to be toying with anti-gravity. And I kept thinking while I'm listening, like, well, hold on a second. How do you get anti-gravity if you don't even know what gravity is, right? But maybe this is the way to get to understanding gravity, is to find the polar opposite, you know? And there is a debate. There's the problem with what we see of gravity in the physical universe is that it doesn't seem to have a polarized, right?
It doesn't seem to be polarized.
It doesn't seem to be polarized, yeah. But he was pointing out that there are these institutions that seem to have been looking into anti-gravity, which he was basically saying, you know, he wasn't saying that he thinks this is kooky science, but he's saying, like, the overall consideration of the general scientific community would say anti-gravity is kooky science, you know, and yet there are these top names associated with these institutions.
Yeah, there was a number of things that he did when he talked about this, generally speaking, where he was name dropping all this stuff and telling you all these historical events about certain people and who their parents were. Yeah. And it's like, there's this one guy and, like, everybody's scared of him. Yeah. Because he's such a genius.
And that guy he was tying into string theory.
Yeah, but his parents were big. I think it was his parents that were big anti-gravity people. Yeah. And then this was another really interesting way of analyzing what's going on. He's like, if I'm gonna try to figure out, like, well, take for example the Manhattan Project, like, where were all the physicists, right? Yeah. Like, you couldn't look, like, because it's public knowledge, like, who has PhDs in physics. Yeah. And so you could have figured out, and I can see how this is a national security risk. Yeah. That you can see that because so many people, like, their PhDs are public. Yeah. That suddenly all the physicists are over in this one place. Yeah, or a bunch of them just cease doing anything. Yeah, they just seem to have no public life. They publish no papers. So as an intelligence agency for a foreign government, that would be suspicious, because you'd be like, wow, they're like,
30%.
Yeah,
or
and this guy-
15% of physicists in the United States just vanish off the face of the
Right.
earth once they graduate. Once
Yeah,
they get their
or
PhD.
or they're all working at some university and none of them have any Nobel prizes and none of them are publishing any papers
Yeah.
and none of them have any type of
yeah.
public life like type of recognition or prizes or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they were all top level, and then suddenly they're all at one university and no
Yeah.
one's publishing anything. It's
Yeah.
like they're working on something.
Yeah. Well, that's just not how you do it. You go full Men in Black. You open up all their documents, you hit delete, and you replace their entire bio with J.
Failed. Yeah. J. Yeah.
You remember that? He types J, and it's like a giant J appears on the screen just to make sure you get the point that he replaced all of his identification.
remember that.
He's like, you see his ID and all this stuff. He worked for the police. Delete, J. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Is like, well, obviously any super secret organization would know that, and could they find a way to hide these people's backgrounds? So that if you did do a search into like where are all the PhDs, there wouldn't be anything missing because you just had removed evidence of those people. So in other words, you would have to be watching as it happened to notice that people were disappearing.
Yeah, that's possible.
Anyway, I got the idea that he was pointing out all this stuff to say that it doesn't seem to be the case.
That what doesn't seem to be the case?
That it doesn't seem to be the case that there's a bunch of missing PhDs.
He did point out this one university in New York that has like all these top level people and like, what are they doing?
Right.
Like,
But why are they top level? Because they have done other work. I thought he was saying that he thought that those people were associated with anti-gravity. Maybe I need to listen to the thing again. I was working.
Same.
It's possible that I misconstrued a bunch of things because I was in the...
Yeah, me too, man.
So,
I mean,
but I had this same thing with Marty.
I was in the back of the bus, like for part of it.
I had this same thing with Marty and Graham. They both took this a different way. I was like, I thought he was saying, here's why I don't think there's a bunch of physicists working on the UFO problem. That's what I thought he was saying. Because he was pointing out to Joe, well, this is what you would see, right? So I don't know. Maybe I completely misconstrued it. I just need to listen to the thing again. Because it was all very interesting. Because I have, that problem has been pointed out before. Like,
but he is cagey about some stuff, so
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to tell
yeah.
what he's saying sometimes.
But was this an issue with the Manhattan Project? That's the other question.
It definitely. I remember Feynman writing about it later. Of course, obviously later, but he talked about how at least they had to pretend in some ways that they were doing things that they weren't doing and all this kind of stuff. Like he's leaving one university and going somewhere else,
Yeah.
and then it was like they were all going to one airport at the same time.
Yeah.
and it was like whoa, no.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were definitely trying to like spread them out and.
Yeah, and they're all like moving their families and everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
Like you can't just
No, you can't have all these physicists from everywhere all packing up their families and moving to one
flying
place.
out to like some tiny airport in Arizona. Like you can't do
exactly.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of consideration in the way that they even got them to the place.
Yeah.
There's even another interesting story where, Feynman borrowed this guy's car to go visit his wife,
Yeah.
and on his way back, I think the car got a flat tire, so he couldn't get back in time or whatever. And this resulted in that guy being found out to be a spy.
Oh.
Like he borrowed the car of the spy.
Oh.
And then didn't get the guy's car back in time because the tire went flat out in the middle of the desert somewhere. And so the dude gets found out for some reason. I can't remember what the circumstances were, but it's just like Feynman seemed to be in so many synchronistic situations.
Yeah,
it's just incredible.
Yeah.
And he talked a lot about Feynman, which was really cool to me.
Yeah.
Hearing him describe like how Feynman had, I can't remember the details of it. But
they went to some conference and then they all figured out that there was some really dumb mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was like, it's the kind of like, I can't find my car keys for 20 years. Oh, they're in my pocket kind of mistake.
Was that the Feynman part?
Yeah, I thought that he said Feynman and some other people figured this out, that there was
He
some
found
issue.
a book in a library at a university, like Eric did, that was Feynman's lectures on gravitation, and I wrote it down because I got to find these. He's like, nobody's gonna have this book, but there was something about this, and he's reading this book, the Feynman Lectures on Gravitation, 1962 to 1963. And he's reading some stuff that Feynman is saying at the time, and he's just like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like this was absurd. But Feynman had recognized some problem or whatever. It's unclear anyway. I'm just like, dude, yeah, that sounds just like Feynman, that he would say something offhanded in some lecture.
Yeah.
That would some mathematician,
Yeah, 60
decades
years later,
is like looking
oh
at
my
it
God.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
This is the kind of stuff that I live for, folks. Like when it comes to podcasts, that interview is the type of stuff that I'm just like, yes.
Yeah.
Like this is why I love podcasts.
Yes.
Hearing these conversations and just learning from people. I mean, how else would we hear, like in conventional media?
Yeah.
How else would we get insight into these?
Yeah. A long form 4-hour conversation with a mathematician and physicist on the level of Weinstein that would, is talking to a layman,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I wish it was around when Feynman was around.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh, Feynman would have been on everyone's
Yeah,
podcast.
he would have gone there.
Yeah,
dude.
he would have loved it.
Man, yeah, I think it's worthy to talk about on a show. I mean, that's the point. I think to me is it makes me think, it gives me ideas, it makes me want to go dig up some reference that he talked about, and I don't know. I want to listen to it again. And the other cool thing about it is that, the fact that a podcast is like the #1 show in the world, basically.
Yeah.
That there could be other high power people listening to that say, you know what, like I want to invest in this, or I want to see if something can be like that. We could put a team together to like work on this guy's ideas. Like that would be amazing.
Yeah, that side of it, and also the other side of like, I hope it spurs, scientific people to think outside the box.
Question where the system that they're in.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the kind of shit I live for. I love it. It's kooky, outside the standard model, but very seemingly credible. Like,
yes.
It's great.
Yep, I will listen to it again, and I'll probably have more to say about it. I was absolutely fascinated with when he started talking about the different states of matter and other forces, because, this is another thing that I've seen in science fiction that I was really, one of my favorite books by Heinlein, I think it was called Fifth Column, I think. It was Fifth Column, I'm pretty sure. And that's what happened in that one, is they were blue sky, and they were, the basic premise is that World War III basically happens when there's a group of scientists that are down in a bunker, and they're basically doing exactly so a bunch of PhD physicists and other people disappear into a military bunker. Right. So exactly what he was talking about, like people vanish into a military bunker to do like blue sky research on crazy physics. Then World War III happens while they're down there. Okay. But they had a genius down there who was doing crazy stuff, and he had already found like some brand new principle in physics, and it resulted in them learning about the full symmetry of forces and stuff in the universe. So they found like 3 other spectra of forces, whole other states of matter, and they continue to develop because they're down in this bunker that's self-contained after the war. And so they know that above them, like crazy stuff's happening and the whole country's being invaded. Right. But they're down there and they perfect these technologies. And then they come out and pretend to be priests. They start a religion. And they have staffs. But the staffs actually do things. Right. And it's really great.
Of course they do.
Yeah. Because they've got this tech built in. And no one can detect it. Because it's based on completely different physics. You know, everyone's detectors are based on electromagnetic stuff, and they're using entire other spectra to do things.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll give you guys an analogy like that comes to mind for this idea. Like if you think about vibration, like, you know, the whole spectra of frequency range of a medium. So like in air, you can vibrate the air down to, I don't know, it just depends. Like how low can you go? I don't know what the threshold at the lowest level is. Probably, I don't, is it infinite? I have no idea.
I don't know.
As an elastic medium, it can be compressed and rarefied at any wavelength as you get bigger and bigger. If you shrink down, at some point, it gets small enough that it can no longer compress because the wavelength is shorter than two molecules of air.
Individual molecules, yeah.
Right? So your medium has limits. I don't know if it has a lower limit, but it definitely has a higher limit.
Yeah.
But once you're, like I said, your wavelength is too small to push two molecules of air together or pull them apart, it's no longer affecting that medium.
Yeah.
But there's a whole nother medium inside, like possibly a medium. It's in the standard model, maybe not, and that would be the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yeah.
Right. So there can be entire other waves of vibration passing through this medium of air in another medium that completely permeates the air. Yeah. In three-dimensional space, it's everywhere within the air, but it's being vibrated on frequency levels that are way higher that do not disturb the air in any way whatsoever. So it doesn't disturb this other medium. So you can, and it's almost, you know, like how would you detect it? We can't feel it. It's, like physically, we can feel all the vibrations in the air. So it's like that idea right there, that there are even more and more and more mediums or media that can be vibrated on various different, that energy can pass through in waves or however it propagates, that are even undetectable to us now, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say, is that maybe there are ways to detect these, but we just have not even considered them or built anything to detect it.
Yeah. Yeah, and what if there's a medium that's huge, right? It only accepts enormous
waves. Yeah. Like extremely low frequency vibrations or oscillations.
And this is why you only see it affecting things on, superstructure levels in the universe. So that would be like dark energy.
Yeah.
Is forces acting on a medium that only accepts enormous low frequency waves.
Right.
And you can only see their effects when you're talking about galactic clusters.
Right. And then
larger structures.
And then because they're not perfectly outside of each other, that there are areas like where the frequencies that the medium of air respond to actually coincide with certain frequencies that the electromagnetic spectrum responds to.
Yeah.
And so you can have a quote unquote entanglement or some kind of interaction between the two media.
Yeah.
And there's something there, like that you can change the energy from one to the other, or vice versa, or something like that, or maybe it creates a new, like a phenomenon that's not normal in either one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think about. So that's what's been going on in my brain.
Yeah. All right.
Are we done?
I think we're done. Right? I think we are.
It's pretty short.
Yeah. What?
Well, this segment is short compared to that one.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the
almost
size.
45 minutes.
All right, we can call it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm sure it's plenty. We're an hour and 6 minutes in.
Yeah. So, once again, check our Patreon feed or the Grimerica Outlawed feed if you want to hear the second half of our conversation with those guys. And you want to hear Kyle and Marty get into a big fight again.
I feel so bad. I really tried to nail him on his theories. Sorry, bro.
Yeah.
At least he has illustrations, which I don't.
Yeah.
He's got me there. He's
yeah.
totally got me.
At least you have drawings.
You have drawings.
They don't
bro.
make any sense, but at least you have them. Yeah. I'm sure you guys will enjoy it if you hear it. So I guess I'll put a link. This is probably totally unnecessary, but I'll put a link in the show notes to the episode of the Joe Rogan podcast that we were talking about.
All right.
Just so people can find it easy, but it's, on Spotify. So.
The next one on my list, though, is Protect Our Parks, number 7.
Number 7. Yeah.
One of my favorite series. On Joe Rogan, dude.
I haven't listened to any of those.
I'd have to bust out the BLs for that episode.
All right, guys. What is happening next week? Well, we have plans. We'll see. I don't want to say anything yet just in case it doesn't work.
Okay.
But yeah, good stuff coming. And brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com if you guys want to email us. Again, I've got stacks of emails, so we're going to have to do listener communications for sure to catch up.
You can call me or text me at 1-800-GFY.
Yeah, that will definitely that'll get a hold of Kyle every time. brothersoftheserpent.com for all the podcast related stuff. Thank you guys very much.
Yes.
We love you.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.